right, let's see. Hope everyone's doing well. Hope you had a good Christmas with family. Hope you've been able to rest. Hope these episodes have helped at least some. Even if it helps one person, that means everything to me. So tonight, turn my phone off. So tonight we're going to get into the wager in heaven's court, or the bet in heaven's court. It's pretty interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'll take us straight into Job chapter 1 and chapter 2. Not the familiar story, though, about patience. It's not a speech about the whirlwind at the end, but the opening scene, the one that happens before a single disaster ever even touches Job's life. The scene where the adversary, or as some would think, the devil, walks into the presence of God, and he stands among the sons of God, right? These two chapters are very short, but that's irrelevant, really. But you can read them in 5 minutes, but they contain a moment so stark, it's undisturbed, or so undisturbed by explanation, that it forces us to ask questions that most like to avoid, really. I at one point I did too. The question would be, why is the adversary even allowed in the council at all, or even in God's presence, right? Why does God bring up Job's name, of all people? And when the suffering falls on a righteous man, who is really behind it? Who's really pushing this whole scene? I'm not going to soften the edges or turn this into a tidy little lesson. It's messy because it challenges a very common trope, mainline Christendom, simplistic explanations. I'm here to trace what it means for how we understand God, evil, suffering, especially, and the larger scope of the war that runs through Scripture, as we've covered in previous episodes. But if we misread this scene, if we import ideas that are not there, we end up with a picture of Yahweh, or a picture of God, that makes him the ultimate source of pain, the ultimate source of evil. And that picture in particular has hurt a lot of people. So let's begin where the book begins. Okay, so just relax and let's do the story. So the story opens up in the land of Uz with a man named Job. He's described as a blameless and upright man. He genuinely fears God, and he shuns evil, meaning he walks in righteousness. He practices righteous things. He has 7 sons and three daughters, of vast herds of sheep. He was a very rich man. She had sheep, he had camels, oxen, and donkeys, and a great household of servants. It would have been so great that this man Job stands out as the wealthiest and most respected man in the entire East, essentially. And after his children hold their feasts, their dinner parties, Job rises early to offer sacrifices on their behalf, thinking to himself that perhaps they have sinned or cursed God in their hearts, or done something and need covering or cleansing before God to be in his sacred space. Then, without warning, the scene shifts upward. It shifts abruptly upward into heaven. And there's a scene. And it says, there comes a day when the sons of God uh, these majestic spiritual beings, they assemble to present themselves before Yahweh, or before God, before the Lord. And among them, among these divine beings, these angelic beings, stepping into that holy assembly comes the adversary. Okay, we need to pause right here, because the way the Hebrew text names the figure, it changes everything about how we hear the rest of the story. Okay, he's not called this figure is not called Satan. It's not as a proper name, like the like Brian or anything we meet later in the New Testament, or Brian or Rachel. It's said Ha-Satan. It means the Satan. The Ha part means the, with, and it's a definite article, and it's firmly in place. That little the carries enormous weight. Okay, it marks this out as a title, an office, a role, or a job within the divine assembly. This is not yet the personal name of a fully fallen archenemy. Ha-Satan, the Hebrew rendering, it means the accuser, the adversary, the one who opposes. Think of it as a job. Okay, just stay with me. It'll make sense. It's like the prosecuting attorney in the council chamber. Okay, we can use judicial terms that way in the divine council, and Scripture shows us that this council repeatedly in First Kings 22, Psalm 82, obviously, and Daniel 7. This assembly is the heavenly administration where the sons of God, or the angelic assembly, report, right? They receive decrees, they receive orders, and then they carry out the orders, they carry out the decrees, they carry out the governance of creation under the Most High God, under the God of gods. Every king throughout history has had such a council. Earthly, obviously, that's our reference. So they had advisors, administrators, generals, and yes, sometimes an official in their court whose specific duty is to challenge plans. Okay, he's the devil's advocate, right? He plays the opponent to test motives and expose weakness before a decision was made, before a decision was final. And that oppositional role keeps the king from folly, or keeps him from screwing up. Not that this is the same, you don't apply that to God, obviously, but it forces clarity. It also guards against self-deception. And that's the office, essentially, that Ha-Satan holds here. He is the council's loyal opposition. His job is to patrol the earth. He says so himself in the text. What was he doing? It says, roaming to and fro, and to bring back reports of hypocrisy, disloyalty, or rebellion among God's image bearers, from us, right? He's watching us. He's not sneaking in. He's not ejected out of God's throne room, out of the council. He belongs there. That's the picture that's painted in the Scriptures, at least in the moment, because the council requires someone to ask the hard questions. It requires, you can't have all yes men, right? So to probe whether professed loyalty, or is it genuine, or merely purchased loyalty, there's a burning question. I mean, of whether the role here's the burning question of whether the role of accuser would involve heaven having multiple accusers. So is there only one, or is there a lot? Honestly, I don't think that the biblical text requires us to believe in multiple hasatans, in multiple accusers running around the divine council. Not the picture that's painted here, at least, but it also doesn't rule it out entirely, right? And there's that it's fascinating to me. The strongest impression that I get from the Hebrew Bible is that Hasatan, with the definite article in it, with Hasatan is a specific function. In Job, he's clearly one individual who shows up twice. He remembers the previous remember the previous conversation, and then he presses the case further. Hasatan's doing this, the accuser. It's the same in Zechariah 3. One figure standing at Joshua's right hand, and what was he doing? To accuse him. The continuity of personality and memory across those scenes make me lean toward it being the same being holding the office both times. You with me? You see what I'm saying? So the role of opposing or testing is not exclusive to one supernatural prosecutor. Any spiritual being could, in theory, step into an adversarial position or posture when the situation mandates that, when it demands it. Think of it like a courtroom. There's usually one official prosecutor, right? But other attorneys or even witnesses can raise objections. I mean, it's a courtroom. There's multiple figures in there. So my personal take is that there is one prominent Hasatan figure in the key council, one prominent accuser figure in the council, in the scenes that we see. One who has made the accuser role his specialty, okay? Maybe even perhaps to the point of obsession. This is an inference. I don't know that for sure. But by the intertestamental period and into the New Testament, that figure has become thoroughly hostile as you watch the progression, right? And he's identified singularly as the devil or Satan. Now, which is now further in the New Testament, he's now a proper name without the article. So it changes. Now the office seems to have been corrupted in him alone. Okay, in him alone. Could there have been others who performed similar functions? I mean, or performed similar functions at different times or in different contexts? I mean, it's possible. I mean, really, I don't know everything, but the council is a vast thing. Thousands upon thousands in Daniel 7, and governance that complex probably has redundancy built in, like checks and balances. But the text we have spotlight one accuser, and later tradition collapses the role onto him entirely. Okay, so one primary Hasatan with the spotlight on him. Yes, so that's where we're going. So multiple simultaneous accusers all holding the same title. The evidence, it just doesn't demand it, and it feels a bit unnecessary to me. The point is still there. The drama works fine with a single, increasingly rebellious prosecutor. And this prosecutor who's challenges grow more malicious over time until he's finally ejected in Revelation 12. It's big time stuff. It's big time stuff. That's where I land. That's my position. Uh, anyway, so let's get back to the narrative. Man, that was a big white rabbit that we were chasing. So what happens when the Lord Himself opens the door to the probing, to allow probing, right? So you remember the story. So the Lord asks, He says, "Where have you been?" And the adversary he replies. What you remember what he says? He says, and he answers truthfully. This is what he was doing. This is his job, walking up and down on the earth. And then the Lord, notice this again. He brings up Job first, right? He says to the adversary, he says, have you taken notice of my servant Job? There's no one like him. He's blameless. He's upright. He fears God, and lastly, he turns from evil. And here, the adversary or the accuser does what his office demands. Remember, at this point, he's doing his job. How he does it is a different thing. But he opposes, he accuses. But the accusation is not a simple charge against Job alone. Okay, it could have been, but it's not. It's far sharper and far more dangerous. Um, he says, in effect, does this man fear God for nothing? And the accuser points to the hedge that the Lord has placed around Job. The he says, like, the blessings that are multiplied on every side, and he claims that the faithfulness is merely only skin deep. Remember, now he's gone to accusing God of something. So now remember the payoff. He says, let the hedge fall, and Job will curse God openly. Meaning, take away his blessings, and Job will curse you. You're wrong, God. That's what he was saying. So, friends, this is not just an attack on one man's character. It's not merely just on Job. This is the adversary. Think about this. Paint it in your mind. It's the adversary standing in the full assembly of the sons of God. There are other angelic beings around him. He's doing this in front of other people, other ones, and he's publicly questioning the duality of human loyalty that the Most High Himself has just praised. He questioned God in front of other people's faces. He is, in essence, he's questioning God's own assessment, the one who made him. The accuser is implying that the Lord's favor has created a false picture, that the hedge itself that God put around Job, it bought a counterfeit righteousness on Job's part. So if he is right, then no human being can really truly love God for God's own sake. You with me? You see what I'm saying? So, like, all piety is fake. I mean, go down the line. We'll knock the dominoes down. All human faithfulness collapses. That literally, the moment the blessings stop, or our faithfulness is essentially bought, is what he's saying. And that accusation, it hangs in the divine council chamber there like smoke. Every son of God hears this. The integrity of God's highest creature, which is humanity, humanity that is made in his image, is placed on trial. And more than that, the wisdom of God's own governance is subtly challenged. Why maintain a hedge around Job that produces only hired servants, right? Why declare a man blameless? Okay, play it out. Why declare a man blameless if the blamelessness is only borrowed from the blessings? So the implications reach a lot further than we usually admit. we just skip past the text and just read it. Oh, look, Satan's in there. And it's not like that. So if the adversary's charge sticks, it undermines the entire project of creation. It calls into question whether any creature can freely return love to the creator without coercion, or without reward. It strikes at the heart of what a covenant is supposed to be. It's not a transaction or a one-way transaction, but it's a relationship of genuine trust and delight. Yet the Lord does not the Lord does not silence the accuser. He does not strike him down for insolence. I'm gonna tell you right now, if it was me, there'd be some problems. But God instead answers with a sovereign calm. He says, very well, all that Job has is now in your power. Only don't touch the man himself. He's off limits, right? The boundary is set. It's set. The test is permitted, but the action belongs to the adversary. Okay. God gives it to him. The Lord refuses the taunt to stretch out your hand. Sound familiar? He will not become the direct agent um, of the pain. What that Job experienced. What we are witnessing is the counsel functioning as it must. It's an open challenge met with measured permission. Okay, God's all wise, and he's going to show it. Just watch. Um, I mean, God has he under divine sovereignty, true sovereignty, and I don't mean the reformed kind. God is the God of gods and Lord of lords. The adversary's office allows him to question, to probe, to oppose, but it does not allow him to override. It's important that you remember that. He must still ask. He must ask permission. He must still receive limits. And in receiving those limits, he is forced to reveal the depth of his own malice. He has to show his hand, the whole hand, because the disasters that follow are not measured or restrained. They are as total as the permission allows. Hasatan is not going to shortchange this. It's an opportunity for him. This scene shows us that even in heaven, loyalty is not assumed. Okay, remember that it is tested, no different than it is here. Even before the throne, accusations can be brought, right? But the Most High remains unchallenged in authority. He can stretch out the question, he can absorb the question and permit the opposition, and then turn the accuser's own challenge into the very means by which the accusation is exposed as, I mean, you guessed it, is exposed as false. The Lord turns to him first and asks, where has he been? Right? So we'll get back to the narrative. The adversary answers that he has been roaming. Well, where has he been roaming? Well, he's been roaming on earth. He's been writing things down, essentially. He's been throughout the earth. He's walking back and forth across it. So what is he doing? He's doing his job. And he's observing everything. And here is where a lot of weight begins to settle. The Lord himself brings up Job. Okay, I'll slow down a little bit. He points to this man and he says, in essence, have you taken notice of my servant Job? He's asking this question to the accuser. He says, there's no one on earth like him. He's blameless. He's upright. He fears God, and this is present tense in the text. He also turns from evil, and that question hangs there, completely sovereign and calm, as we said. It's not defensiveness; it is confidence. God knows exactly what He is doing by naming Job in this assembly. Okay. The adversary responds with a charge that cuts to the heart of everything. He implies that Job's faithfulness is not real at all. It's important that we hit this home, that Job only fears God because God has built a wall of protection around him. He doesn't have anything to worry about. So why would he curse God? Why would he curse one who gives him everything? Um, that's the charge, that God has blessed the work of his hands. He has God has multiplied Job's possessions. If that's removed, if you remove that protection, the adversary says, if you reach out and strike everything that he has, and Job will surely curse you to your face. He will surely curse God to his face. You see the accusation. It's not just against Job. It is against the possibility of any true human loyalty to God. If it's bought with Job, it's bought with all of us, right? And the adversary is claiming that no one serves God for who he is. It's a big time charge. And he says he's saying that we all serve for the benefits only. Strip away the blessings, and then the mask comes off. The ruse is over. The Lord's reply is very carefully measured, and it's unshaken. And he tells the adversary, he tells the accuser that everything Job has is now placed within the accuser's power, um, but with a firm boundary. He says, "Do not lay a hand on Job himself." So everything around Job is open game, open season. And with that permission granted, limited and controlled, the adversary departs from the Lord's presence, from the divine counsel, and goes to work. Okay. Chapter 2 unfolds in almost the same way. Okay. Showing us that this is no one time event. Again, the sons of God gather before the Lord, and again the adversary comes among them. The Lord speaks first, once more. He's the king. He points back to Job. He says, Have you noticed that my servant Job still holds to his integrity? Remember, Job lost everything. Job didn't have anything left. He said, there is still no one like him on earth, God says. He remains faithful, even though you moved me to act against him. This is Yahweh talking to the accuser. And against him without any cause, mind you. So that phrase, without any cause, meaning there was no cause to do this because Job was faithful and righteous. The without any cause is crucial, and God acknowledges there the adversary's role in inciting the action. Okay, and he states plainly that there was no justification for it in Job's life. Job is righteous. The suffering is not punishment. Okay, the suffering is not punishment. The adversary presses harder this time. He concedes that a man will give everything he has in order to save his own skin. But he then insists that if God will only reach out and strike Job's flesh this time, strike his flesh and bone, Job will curse God outright. And again, the adversary, he wants God to be the one who strikes directly. Again, God refuses. So the accuser was taunting Yahweh. But instead, God says, very well, he is in your power, but spare his life. And the adversary leaves the presence, just like he did the first time, and he sets to work on Job. He afflicts Job with horrible sores from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. That is the scene. You could visualize it. It's a stark, it's a stark scene, told very plainly. No narrator steps in and to explain why the adversary has access to the council. Right? There's no apology for the pain that follows. Just the assembly, just the accusation, the tightly bounded permission, and then the disasters that crash down on that man Job's life. Most of us grew up hearing this described as a kind of like a cosmic bet, as it were, a cosmic bet, right? God and Satan wagering over a man's soul. God needing to prove, on the one hand, God needing to prove something to the devil. But friends, that picture distorts everything. That's a fairy tale. It makes God seem reactive and almost insecure, and it quietly shifts the blame for the suffering onto God, right? So the blame doesn't sit in God's lap, but it's as if he is the real author, but uses the adversary as a middleman. Essentially, that's the argument with that. But the text that does not allow that kind of a reading. Look again at who starts the conversation. Remember, I mentioned this when we were talking about it. Who started the conversation both times? The Lord. God did. The adversary does not arrive with a scheme or already in motion. It may have been in his head, but it wasn't in motion. And he answers a question and then levels the charge. And every time he dares God to strike directly, it's almost as if there have been prior issues, but I can't prove that. But so God places clear limits and then assigns the action to the accuser's own hand. Excuse me. The raiders then come, and the fire falls, and the wind strikes the house. The boils all over Job's body. I mean, he was suffering. I mean bad. All of this flows from the adversary's malice, not from God's own direct intervention. This was not a wager. This was not a bet. This is an accusation that was brought before the heavenly council, and everyone was watching and listening. But this was met with sovereign permission, and it keeps evil firmly on a leash. To grasp what's happening, we have to see the setting for what it is. Okay, the divine council is in session. Scripture gives us other glimpses of this assembly. You have 1 Kings 22 is a big one, as a spirit steps forward before the throne and offers to deceive Ahab's prophets. Remember, he was in Isaiah. In Isaiah 6, living creatures, they surround the throne, and what are they doing? They're calling out God's holiness the whole time. In Psalm 82, that's a big one. God, he rises in the congregation of the mighty to judge the unjust gods. Daniel 7 is a huge one. The Ancient of Days takes his seat while countless thousands stand in attendance. It was a crowd without number. In Deuteronomy 32, the nations are apportioned to the number of the angelic sons of God. And while Israel at the same time remains God's own people, his own portion. These sons of God are real spiritual beings, and they're created. I have to hammer this home almost every episode. It's important. They're accountable. They're administrative. Some stay loyal, and others rebel, but none are equal to the Most High. Here in Job, this adversary still functions within that order, at least for now. Okay, at least for now. He is the accuser. He is the accuser role whose task includes patrolling the earth. He brings charges of hypocrisy, of lying, or whatever other sins found in mankind wherever he finds them. And his charge against Job is devastating in its scope. No human being fears God for nothing, is what he's saying. So, like, all loyalty is bought. If you remove the payoff, the loyalty collapses, remember? And God knows the charge is false. Yet he allows this to play out. He allows the test. You think he didn't know what he was doing? It's not because he needs convincing, not because his honor is fragile, but because the truth about faithful humanity must be displayed openly, and it must be displayed openly before the council. Because if Hasatan is right, everything falls. The adversary's lie must be exposed for what it is. And so it has to be able to be played out. The disasters that follow are therefore not divine punishment, as many would think. And the text never says God sends them. It does say that the adversary goes out and sets to work and unleashes them. And Job will later cries that the Lord has taken away. But the book itself will gently correct this. It will gently correct that perception. So when God finally speaks and Job repents of words spoken in darkness, meaning he didn't know what he was talking about, and he was sorry that he said what he said. What we're watching is spiritual warfare operating within unbreakable divine boundaries. Does that make sense? Evil has real power, terrifying power. Even we can give it that, but it's delegated and measured, and it's always revocable. God is so completely sovereign that and I don't mean by determinism. But he can take the adversary's worst intention and weave it into a larger purpose without ever even originating the evil himself. Okay? This is not penal substitution. He's not venting wrath on Job for sin. Okay? Job is blameless, and God declares it so. And he says this repeatedly, that Job was blameless. There is no guilt being transferred, no justice being satisfied by pain. This is the council in session. Okay, and the Lord permitting the accuser to run this game out, to test whether covenant loyalty can survive the removal of every comfort, of every blessing, of every physical part of love that you can see. And Job holds. After the livestock is gone, the servants are slain, His own flesh and blood, his own children are crushed beneath the fallen house. Job rises, and these are all like naturalistic type disasters. Kind of makes you think, well, about things going on in the world, right? And so Job, he falls to the ground, and what does he do? He blesses the name of the Lord. And the narrator, he adds quietly that in all this and all the stuff that happened to fellow Job, that he did not sin or charge God with wrongdoing, although the accuser did that. Now who's the righteous one? Then after the second assault, when Job is found sitting in ashes, scraping his sores, when even his own wife, remember his own wife, I was like, I read that the first time, I was like, that is cold. She urges him to curse God and die. And Job answers, he answers that we receive good from God, should we not also receive hardship, right? Some renderings say evil, but it's hardship. And again, the narrator notes that Job did not sin with his lips. He holds fast to his integrity. I want to widen the view just a bit, because Job 1 and 2 are not a standalone tale. They open a window onto the great conflict that threads the entire it threads the entire Bible, right? If you begin in Genesis 3, which is a serpent or shining one, in the original language, it's Nakash. This person appears in the garden, right? And the cunning of the creatures the Lord God had made, it speaks to the woman, questions God, God's own command, right? It suggests that God is withholding something. And what is he withholding? He's withholding something good. That obedience will actually diminish than fulfill. That's what the Nakash was saying. The charge is subtle but lethal. God cannot be fully trusted, is what it's saying. And the text never calls this serpent Satan. It never equates it explicitly with this figure that we meet in Job's counsel. It's not the same one. Okay, the roles are different. One operates covertly in the garden. It might not have been covertly because Adam and Eve were not alarmed when they saw it, right? But the other stands openly in the heavenly council, in the heavenly assembly, accusing from accusing from within the administrative order. Now whether they are the same being lies beyond what the early chapters tell us directly. Okay, later on, the scriptures will connect the ancient serpent to the devil, or the ancient shining one to the devil, and Satan in Revelation 12 and 20. But in the opening pages of Genesis, and in Job, we are shown two distinct figures, or two distinct manifestations of hostility towards God and his purposes. Okay, you with me? I hope you're getting that. Try not to let it be too much, but what unites them is the shared aim to undermine the possibility of genuine human loyalty. Genesis 6, the sons of God took upon human. They look upon human women. They take them, and the earth fills with violence. Spiritual rebellion spills over into the human population, or excuse me, into the human corruption. Deuteronomy 32, when the Most High divided the nations, he set their boundaries according to the number of the sons of God, the number of the angelic sons of God. but Israel he kept as his own inheritance or his own portion. The other nations fall under these spiritual overseers. And overseers who, as Psalm 82 reveals, they govern unjustly and must finally be judged. Now we get to Daniel 10. A heavenly messenger. A heavenly messenger is opposed. Guys, I'm having to get everything back together because I guess when you're doing stuff, I guess when you're recording things, you have to remember to have the battery that's fully charged. And my camera uses the battery faster than it charges. So anyway, I'm trying to remember where in the world that I stopped in my mind and then get going again. So let me get the computer. The sound is off, and then make sure the sound is off, and then we'll get going. So but I try to think where I was. So the larger part of the created order has been delegated to spiritual powers. Rebellion, it spreads and humanity suffers in the fallout, okay? Yet Israel remains Yahweh's or God's direct portion, belongs to him. And in the fullness of time, Yahweh himself steps into the chaos, into in the person of his son Jesus, who lives the truly human life. He recapitulates the story of Adam and Israel, and he faces every accusation and temptation without faltering. He takes upon himself the full weight of the power's malice. Okay? He lets it happen. Colossians 2 tells us that on the cross, he disarmed the rulers, the authorities, exposing them publicly, meaning the spiritual powers, not men. He triumphed over them in this. And the cross is not the Father punishing the Son in order to satisfy wrath. The cross is the faithful Son of God standing in the place where Job stood, essentially, where this is where Adam fell, where Israel repeatedly stumbled. Christ fulfilled this. Christ absorbed the accusation, he absorbed the mockery, the violence, and rising victorious, stripped the powers of their ultimate weapon. Job, which was death, but Job is the foreshadowing, okay? And Jesus he's the fulfillment. When Job refuses to curse God, he proves that the adversary or the accuser in the divine council, he proves him wrong about one man. When Jesus refuses to come down from the cross, Jesus refuses to curse or revile in return. He proves the adversary wrong about the entire human race. Okay, the lie that no one fears God for nothing is shattered forever. In front of the council, all of heaven now knows it and has seen it. And so because he is risen and because Christ is risen, the boundaries that God set in Job's day are now enforced by a king who bears the scars and he holds the keys of death and Hades, which he took from the one who had the power of death. And this changes everything about how we face suffering today. Suffering is not in the normal course. It's not divine discipline or wrath vented, okay? It's the lingering It's the lingering overlap of the ages. The kingdom has broken in, but it is not yet. Okay, it's not yet consummated. The powers are they're indeed defeated, yet they still lash out where they're permitted to. Where areas have not been conquered, you can think of it that way. But the permission now flows through the hands of a risen Lord who literally knows what it is to be struck. Every blow is measured. It's every blow is limited, and ultimately is turned toward resurrection purpose. Okay, think about that. Let me be clear about what this does not mean. It does not mean every hardship is a personal demonic assault. It's easy to say that. But much suffering comes from living in a fractured world, a broken world, a difficult and hard world. You have illnesses, you have accidents, and you have the fallout of human choices, wrong or right. It does not mean that God is passive or distant. He's there the whole time. He's with us. He remains sovereign over the council. Okay, he's the king, is what that means. I'm not again. I'm not referring to the sovereignty that's defined within Calvinism. I think that's completely wrong. But nothing teaches us apart from his permission. It This does not mean that we should silence our questions. God welcomes questions. We should ask. And Job questions boldly. He's put in his place, but the Psalms cry out, why? And things like how long? Lament is part of faithfulness because you're looking to him for answers, right? So it most certainly does not mean that God authors evil. He does not. James, the first chapter of James states plainly that God tempts no one. Okay, he doesn't tempt anyone. The the evil one does. But God is not, he cannot be tempted by evil, and he does not tempt anyone. What it means is that when suffering does indeed come, and it comes to all of us, we are not forced to accuse God of cruelty. We can grieve deeply, and we can rage honestly. We can question fiercely, of course, and still trust that the one who is enthroned is not the one striking us. Okay, your prayers go to him in response to this. The adversary strikes, and the adversary is held on a shortening leash by the Father who loves us. He loves you, and he loves me, and the Son who conquered for us. Many of us were raised to see suffering primarily as God exposing sin or satisfying justice, but that lens often reads later atonement theories backward into older texts. Job resists that lens. And Job is righteous, and he says this 4 times, that there's no hidden guilt there's no hidden guilt being punished. There's no wrath being appeased. There is an accusation being answered. Okay, the sacrificial system in the book of Leviticus, is about cleansing and restoring access so that God can he can continue to dwell among his people. It's about cleansing sacred space so he can be with us. It's not about appeasing divine anger through punishment. Okay, when the New Testament, when it speaks of Jesus' offering in Hebrews 7 through chapter 10, it presents him as the great high priest who enters the true heaven or the true sanctuary once for all. Okay, cleansing and opening permanent access. His ongoing work is intercession. Christ's ongoing work is intercession. Okay, it's not enduring punishment. It's way more than that. So many Christians will do the following: um, we stop at the cross, at the event of the cross, and then have no idea what Jesus is doing right now post cross. So post ascension, post ascension. So during the ascension and post descension and post ascension, the picture throughout this is victory and restoration, not wrath. God does not hate you. It's not wrath transferred. It's Job 1 and 2 give us the earliest glimpse of that very victory pattern. The adversary he accuses, the righteous man stands firm, and the limit that God placed is enforced. Okay, it it is a test essentially. But the accuser is exposed through that test on him, and Jesus carries that pattern to completion and turns it into the very triumph for every one of us. So the question is that, like, where does that leave us tonight? Right. So like it leaves us with a God who is vastly bigger, never caught off guard, never the source of evil, yet always the sovereign, always the God of gods. That's what that means. It leaves us with a real but defeated enemy. He's dangerous still. They are dangerous still, but they're hindered and they're awaiting final removal. It leaves us with a very high calling to the small and to the great, to hold fast your integrity, to refuse to curse God no matter the situation, no matter what comes. It's to trust him and call to him and be in prayer. And it leaves us with really unshakable hope. The one who set the boundary in Job's day, okay, now reigns at the Father's right hand. Um, he's nail scarred and he's alive forever. And the book of Job then closes with earthly restoration. A double portion Job receives. He doesn't replace them, his new children, but he had new children, a long life. But the true ending is written in Revelation 12, where this accuser allegedly could be the same one, is literally hurled down with the other wicked angels, with the other angelic beings at last in Revelation 12. And the human brothers and sisters overcome him by the blood of the Lamb. You see the connections now? And this is by the word of their testimony. It says that they loved not their lives even unto death, meaning that they were willing to die. And that's the arc that begins here, right? In these quiet, terrifying opening chapters. There's so much there. So friends, whatever boy or girl, man or woman, or whatever trial you carry tonight, sickness, loss, betrayal, silence, hear this. The council is still in session, and the accuser still accuses, but the boundary is still held. God loves you. So stay near him constantly and be vigilant in your prayers. He answers them. It takes time sometimes, but he answers. Okay? God responds to prayer. There were many places. I mean, yeah, you could argue every place in the scriptures where whoever the person was going through some sort of hardship. And what did they do? They prayed. And sometimes they didn't get a response, but sometimes they did get a response. And I would say most of the time, I think every time that they prayed, they got a response. And part of the test is to wait and to be patient and to trust. But it's almost like when you pray, there's an angel, there's an angel that carries your message to the heavens. And there's sort of like a delay, it would seem. Sometimes there's not, sometimes there is. I don't know how the spiritual realm works in coalescence with the physical, but you can infer that sometimes it takes a minute. Sometimes it takes weeks. Sometimes it takes days. Sometimes God decides that you need to wait. Other times the response is immediate in answer to prayer. But it would suggest that if you don't pray, if you're going through something and you refuse to pray, you're like, well, I can resort to my own devices. I mean, like, nobody says this, but like, this is just me talking. If you trust in yourself, then most of the time, arguably, there's not going to be help that comes. You need to pray. And that is your weapon. We're not powerful in and of ourselves. And we have access to the Father. We have access to him because of what Christ is doing currently right now in the heavens as being our permanent high priest. You are constantly being cleansed. When you come to him, you say, Lord, I've lied. And you're repenting daily and that sort of thing. But when you ask for forgiveness, you're being cleansed. And so if you're constantly cleansed, then that means that you can come to God because of what Christ is doing on your behalf. He's interceding in prayer. He's acting as your high priest who is permanent. He never dies. He's there all the time. He's fulfilling that office, that position, right? And he wants you to come. He doesn't want you not to come, because when you don't come, guess what happens? Well, you stay in that rut. So I hope don't turn this off. I hope that this has been an encouragement. And it's an encouragement to me when I read your comments or I get the messages, and it spurs me along. So please keep them coming. If you have questions, I'll do everything I can to answer them. But I do appreciate your positivity and the pushing me along, because it means something to me. And it means something to me if one person is helped, or one person understands something a little bit more clear than they did before. So, but with that, I'll say, may the Lord bless you, and may the Lord keep you. May the Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you, and may he lift up his countenance to you and grant you peace. Good night. I hope you guys are doing well, and I'll throw another one up soon. Like I said, stay in the Lord's presence, in his presence, and keep praying. Stay vigilant, and stay near